Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Carol Stern, and I'm a librarian at the Glen Cove Public Library. Before we begin with this, I'd like you to mark your calendars and sign up for the next month's author is Lisa Barr. She wrote Women on Fire. She'll Zoom with us Tuesday, October 25th at 2 p.m. Again, Tuesday, October 25th at 2 p.m. So Robert, welcome again to the Glen Cove Public Library. It's an honor to have you with us. When you keep writing, that makes me very happy. So
thanks. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me back.
We love it. Thank you. Robert is a best-selling author, lawyer, and journalist. He is best known for his riveting spy and legal thrillers, but he's also won over countless hearts and minds with his literary fiction, most notably The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell and The World Played Chess. Robert was born February 17th in 1961 in Idaho and raised in California. Growing up a middle child in a family of 10 siblings, he jokes that he didn't get much chance to talk, so he wrote. He attended UCLA School of Law, Stanford University. In 1999, Robert retired from his 13-year legal career to write novels. He and his wife, Christina, and 2 children live in Seattle, Washington. So if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat and we'll try to get them all at the end of the discussion. We're going to mute everybody during this discussion, and then you can, after we talk, if you want, you can actually talk to Robert yourself. So I haven't personally read many books about the Vietnam War. I've seen lots of movies, but this book is so relatable today. It's a universal story of overcoming hardships. The Vietnam War, the coming of age, father and son relationships are explored in The World Played Chess. Can you tell us how you got the idea for writing this book?
Yeah, I can. It's a little bit of necessity, the mother of invention, right? And then a little bit of it was a poignant moment in my life. And I didn't really recognize it fully at the time. Basically what happened is The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell came out and did very, very well. It did extremely well. And my publisher at Lake Union said, I will see you in 3 years, which meant it takes about 3 years to write a literary novel. And I grew up reading these kind of books, and so they're always very special to me. And I wanted to write another literary novel, but I really didn't know what I was going to write about. And I was, kind of coming up with ideas and then rejecting those ideas. And suddenly I started thinking about my summer between high school and college. And I recalled working on a construction crew with 2 Vietnam vets. And, I began to realize really what a poignant moment that is in my life. And I think everybody on this Zoom call can look at their own life and say, this was an epiphany for me. This was an epiphany for me. And you may have many epiphanies in your life, but there are some that are just very, very poignant. And for me, the summer in between high school and going off to college was really a summer where I think I grew up. I grew up in a small town at the time, a very small town called Burlingame, California. It was very blue collar. It was very middle class. Now, like many places, you can't touch a house in Burlingame for under several $1 million. But at the time, it was just sort of this bucolic place to grow up. And I grew up with my buddies, and we rode our bikes, in the 70s, and we rode our bikes all over the place, and we played 3 Flies Up and all those things. And I never had, I never experienced anything really. I mean, outside of just sort of, it was like being on the show The Wonder Years. We didn't have people of color. We didn't have, a lot of things. It was, you slept with your doors unlocked. I mean, it was just very simple. And all I wanted to do that summer was really enjoy my final summer before college. Now, I knew I had to work because I always worked, and I worked because my brothers and sisters and I worked to contribute to our education. And I think that was a matter of necessity. My father, was going to have trouble, educating all 10 of us. But also, I think it was a matter of my mom and dad realizing how important it is for each of us to have a stake in the game a little bit. And so I didn't have a job yet that summer. I literally had just graduated, and my brother-in-law came up to the house, and as I mentioned in the book, he said, you want a job? And it really was an epiphany for me, because my boss in the book, who I call Todd, he was not going to treat me like a kid. I was 18 years old, and 18 years old to him was a man. 18 years old to him was a man that could carry a gun in the bush in Vietnam. And so he treated me like a man, and he really did test me on many occasions to see how I would respond. And what would happen was, I'd work with him, and I worked with William. And when work was done, that was when we'd sit down and have a beer. And there were those moments when they would talk to me about the things that happened. Some of the stories didn't happen that summer, because I worked for Todd for about 3 years. I worked for him every chance I got, every break I got. And so it was kind of over the course of those 3 years. But that summer was just one of those moments. And as I started to think about the story, I recalled a book. It was called Nam by Mark Baker. And I went back to see if I still had it. And I did. It was sitting right on my shelf. And it was 1981. So it was a first edition. And it was a story about the men and women, mostly men, 99% men, who served in the bush in Vietnam. So it was obviously something that was important to me then. But as I thought about it, I began to realize sort of what it really was all about. It was that moment in life that all men and women have, where we're no longer considered boys and girls. We're considered men and women. And I had to grow up fast that summer, and it was really a blessing before I went off to college.
Interesting. So I guess are you saying that a lot of the book is autobiographical, or are they written about people that you know?
Yeah, a lot of the book is true. The characters, the names I've changed, but they're real. A lot of them. But I didn't write it as a true story. I wrote it as fiction. And it's funny, all my family and my cousins, they want to know, okay, what's true and what's not true. But I took the moment, and I took the moments in that were poignant in that summer, and then I took the moments that were poignant in my son's football season when he was a senior, and I was we were raising him, and I began to blend them together. And really what I did was I wrote a story of Vincent that summer and his son Bo. And I asked my son to read the book, because I didn't want him to feel like I was hijacking his life without some say in it. So I asked him if he would review it, and he did. And he came to me and he said, Dad, I don't know anything about Vietnam. I don't know why William is the way he is. I don't know why Todd is the way he is. Nobody ever talks about Vietnam. We don't read about it in books, like World War I or World War II. I've seen the movies, but I don't understand it. So it would really help me if I had a better understanding of what they went through over there and why they are the way they are. And so it was really my son that gave me the idea for the journal. And that's when I really had to go to work, because I had a lot of reading to do. I had a lot of things to watch, and I had to put together a year that a guy spends over in Vietnam.
So, I think that the Vietnam War actually changed the world a bit. It was the first media war that was out there. So people actually got to see the horrors of what happens in the war. How do you think this impacted young people coming of age in the 70s? And, at that time, nobody knew what PTSD was. So can you talk about any of this?
Yeah, I can, because I've received dozens of emails from people that grew up in that time period who will email me and tell me that they served, and it was painfully accurate. to what they went through, or they'll email me and say that their brother or their uncle or their husband served and they could never understand why he couldn't talk about it, and now they can. I've had a woman tell me a heartbreaking story about it, growing up in a small town, and they lost 17 men, and just totally changed the town, changed it completely. I play golf, and I golf with a friend of mine who's he's 80. Doug is 80, and you know, Doug will tell you about things that changed the world. And one of the things he talks about is Kennedy's assassination, and the other thing he talks about is the Vietnam War. Watergate is a third thing. It's sort of a loss of innocence, and I think, as you mentioned, hang on a second. I think what it is it's sort of that loss of innocence, where you know, the country, I think we knew the horrors of World War I and World War II, obviously, because of especially what happened, you know, to the Jewish population in Europe, and what we found out about it. I mean, nothing could be more horrific than that. But as you mentioned, having journalists embedded with the young men in the bush was really difficult, because I think a lot of people could see these young boys, you know, these 18, 19, 20-year-old young boys being carried out on stretchers. And I think it also, you know, there was a reason we were in World War I, and there was a reason we were in World War II, and they were noble reasons. And I think the public began to ask, why are we in Vietnam? You know, what are we doing over there? Why are we sacrificing these young men's lives? What are we gaining? And I think we began to grow up and have a different perspective of who we were as a nation, and what our role in the world was really supposed to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was something. There were a lot of good lines in the book that I just loved when you talked about this. I wrote them down. When you write, do you think about these thoughts when you're writing them, or do they just pop in your head as you're writing? So I wrote down 5 of them. The difference between living and dying was nothing more than dumb luck. Every minute of every day is a gift, and growing old is a privilege, not a right. I love that. Failure is easier to live with than regret. Dying is hardest on the living, and reality punched me in the face. So how did you come up with all these great lines?
You know, I know how this is going to sound, but it's really the truth. Is I didn't. My characters did. And when I'm in the moment, when I'm writing and I'm writing well, my characters speak to me, and I really reach a place where I just allow the characters to talk to me and to tell me their story, so that I don't hijack the story. I think that's the biggest mistake that an author can make, is trying to hijack a story and insert him or herself into the story, or insert his or her voice or thoughts into the story. The story needs to be told by the characters. And there's so many characters in a novel, they can't all talk the same way and speak the same way and think the same way. So, you know, I really try to give my characters freedom to tell their story, to tell what happened to them. An example of that is, I never knew that Victor Cruz was not going back to Spanish Harlem. I never knew that until I got to that moment when I was writing the book, and he told me it was all make believe. He'd made the whole thing up just to get William through Vietnam, and that he was never going back. And that was a horrible moment for me as a writer. It was a horrible moment for me as a reader, because I really liked Victor Cruz. Yeah. And I really didn't want him to be one of the 50,000 with his name on the wall. I really did believe Victor Cruz was going to survive, and they were going to get home, and that's how it was going to end. And then I realized that wasn't how it was going to happen. So I really try to just let the characters tell me their story, and let me know, you know, what is their story. And so, you know, things like growing old is a privilege, it's not a right. That's something that, you know, I I think I heard my wife say one time, or it might have been my sister Susie, who also was fond of saying, you know, when we get together and somebody starts saying, well, my back hurts and my knees are bad and I got this and I got that, she says, well, growing old isn't for sissies, and the alternative is a lot worse.
It's
You
true.
know? So, you know, you hear these things, or I hear these things as a writer, and they kind of get stored away. And I'm never really 100% sure when they're going to come back out. So anyway, that's sort of how that comes about.
It's funny, and I hear these things as a reader, and I store them in my head to say them again too, because I think they're such great lines. It's good.
Thanks.
So, you know, what we were talking about before, the social media, we pointed out the irony in the book. You pointed out the irony that these guys at 18 went over to Vietnam, fought, and then they come back to the United States and they couldn't vote. And they were given no, you know, what they did with the media. They also like didn't give them, the people were so against the Vietnam War that they treated these veterans terribly.
Yeah.
Can you want to talk about that? That, you know, how did that affect your writing of the novel? Or
Well, it just, I mean, to me, it just sort of emphasized the, you know, the mistreatment that, you know, so many of these GIs went through, and what they had to deal with. Like I said, you know, it was different circumstances, but it was along similar lines. Is I could go and work on a construction crew and work with equipment and heavy equipment and perform those jobs and do that. And if, you know, if I didn't go off to college and I continued working on that job, and I was treated as a man by everybody on that job, yet I couldn't go into a bar and get a beer. You know, I couldn't do that either. So, you know, there were so many of these guys that, you know, it's funny. It's Sylvester Stallone made a book called First Blood, made a movie called First Blood. And I know the guy who wrote the book, but there's a line in there where he basically says, you know, he can operate heavy equipment. He can drive trucks. He can drive tanks. He can do all this stuff. And yet he comes back home and he can't do anything. You know, so there is an irony there, but I think that irony goes to the fact that, you know, do you want to treat these individuals as men or as boys? And, you know, I think unfortunately so many of them were boys that never got the chance to grow up. And, you know, who knows what wonderful things they might have done with their lives. You know, it's sad when that happens, you know, when a young person dies, because there's not only the death of the person, there's the death of that hope, you know, that belief that, you know, that person might have done something really terrific with their life.
You know, it's interesting, just a sidekick. You dedicated the book to the Vietnam veterans. So one of the jobs that I do at the library here is I run the local history room, the archival room. So we've been doing personal histories of Glen Cove veterans from World War I, World War II, the Korean, Vietnam, Persian Gulf Wars. And I found that the most traumatized vets were the ones from the Vietnam War. So now these guys are in their 70s and 80s, and they're still feeling the effects of what the war did to them in the 70s. I think one of the themes you were talking about is how they, you know, what we were just saying, how they were lack of treated when they came home from the war, the treatment, and how horrific it was. But it just, as a side, you know, it's still lingering in all these people all these years later. You know,
yeah, the human person is not supposed to watch people get blown up. They're not supposed to watch people get blown apart. You know, I think about what's going on over in Europe right now, and the horrors that those poor people are witnessing. You know, people being summarily executed in front of them. You know, people that they've lived with in their town for years and years and years. You know, they might have been the baker or the launderer, the dry cleaner or whatever, and they're watching them. People are just, we're not made to see those kind of things. You know, again, an example on a much smaller scale is in 2016, I had a stroke. It was my wife's 50th birthday party, and I was throwing a big party for her at a location, and I started seeing double, and I thought I had a migraine, and somebody there knew well enough to say, no, and they called an ambulance, and I left my wife's party in the back of an ambulance, and I was in the hospital for about 3 days. And, luckily I recovered. I don't know if I recovered fully. Sometimes I wonder, but, one of the products of that stroke that I've never been able to get past is I suddenly have low levels of anxiety. And I don't know if it's anxiety about dying or if it's anxiety about living. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely something that changed my life. And so you can imagine what those young men went through, what they saw, what they witnessed, what they had to persevere and continue on. It must have just been, it must have been horrible. I mean, I can't imagine, how someone ever gets over that.
Yeah, it sounded horrific. Have you had many vets read your book? Have you had any responses from people like that?
I have received several, though not like The Extraordinary Life of Sam Howell. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is I've had people say to me that, I want my husband to read your book, but he served in Vietnam and he won't read it because they don't want to go back there. They don't want to relive those moments. It's too hard for them. It's too difficult for them. So, I hear more from spouses or children or friends, and things like that than I actually hear. And when I was writing the book, it was very hard to find Vietnam veterans that wanted to talk to me about it. I was very fortunate to have a very good friend who helped me with the story, make it authentic, make it real. But I had, here's a good example of the guy that helped me, Bob Mannion. He had as a brother-in-law, and he said his brother-in-law flew jets over in Vietnam, flew planes in Vietnam, and he really wanted to talk to me. And so I need to get a hold of his brother-in-law. So he gave me his brother-in-law's number, and I called, and I got no response. And I sent him an email, and I got no response. And a week later, I was working with Bob on some other things. He said, "Have you talked to Steve?" And I was like, he hasn't responded. "Oh no, here, give him another call." So I gave him a call, and I gave him a call, and I gave him a call, and I never heard back from him. And I finally had to say to Bob, Bob, I don't think he wants to talk to me. I really don't. Maybe he's telling you that he does, but I don't want to keep bothering him. I don't want to do that.
So you weren't in Vietnam. I had read that online. So how did you do all your research? Like, how did you do this? Because you really described what went on very graphically about the war.
Yeah, I read a number of firsthand accounts. And I read some of the more famous ones, and I read some of the very innocuous ones. But I read them, and I read them in great detail. And then, I watched the documentaries, and I watched the movies. And then, like I said, Bob helped me a lot. He helped me a lot with what it was there. And then my son had just visited Vietnam for about 2 weeks. And it's amazing to me. He said of all the countries he's ever visited, that was the one where he liked the most, and he liked it the most because the people were so warm and friendly. After what they went through, it's amazing that they have that kind of personal strength. And so he was able to sort of fill me in on some stuff like the terrain and the weather and the humidity and all those kinds of things. But really, it was a matter of just reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. And then I took just tons of notes. And I used those personal recollections that those guys had to create a character that was sort of an amalgamation of all that. And I created William's year in Vietnam.
So you talked about the different time periods in the book, 1967 to 1968, 1979, and 2015. How did you come up with the three different timelines?
So 1979 was the year I graduated from high school. Timelines are really difficult because you have to make sure that I'm working on a book now. You have to make sure that everything's going to fit. So 79 is when I graduated high school, and then William's time there, I had to sort of phase that with how old he was at this point in time. And as I remembered it, both the guys I worked with were just about 29 and 30 years old. So I worked sort of backwards from there, so that it was still a fresh experience for them, still something that they had dealt with. And then the present day, I don't know how I did. I might have just used the year that I was writing the book for that, but I wanted Vincent to be, a certain age. I didn't want him to be, an old man or anything like that. So, I just sort of play with that as I go.
It's very interesting. So what's your process of writing the book like then? Like how long does it take you to write? How long did it take you to write this book? Each character you wrote with such detail. You talk about your day-to-day routine and stuff?
Yeah, it really varies. I just got through writing that book that takes place in 1938. And it's based upon a trial that occurred in 1938 in Seattle, and my wife's grandfather was the trial attorney. It's a really interesting case and everything. And I didn't mark on my calendar when I started doing research, because he had a lot of scrapbooks that had every day what happened in the trial. So I had a lot of that to get through, and I had a lot of things. But I started writing the book on August 3rd, and I finished it on Friday. But I finished the first draft, which is not to say I finished the book. It's just to say I finished the first draft. And now, I'll let it sit a little while. I'm working on some other things. I'll let it sit for a little while before I go back to it with a fresh pair of eyes and start to work on it. This book, The World Played Chess, the story of the summer of '79 and the story of my son's senior year in high school, I could write at a fairly, good pace. But like I said, I had to stop and put it aside, and I had to do a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of all those things. And I contemplated going over to Vietnam, but the timing didn't work because it was COVID, and so I couldn't leave. I couldn't go anywhere. So I had to do a lot of Google Earth, and I had to do a lot of studying of the terrain, using Google Earth. And then my contact had maps, and a lot of the things that he had were able to help me sort of understand where Marines served, which I didn't know at the time was different than the Army. The Army and the Marines didn't serve in the same locations in Vietnam. So, I had to create, where they were, and I had to create a base and all those things. So, normally I like to travel to the places that I'm going to write about. But I didn't get that chance with this book because of COVID.
Will you go to Vietnam eventually? Is that a travel destination?
I would like to.
I would too.
I kind of missed the family trip, which was my siblings. We all travel places together now, and I had a family a little bit later in life, so my kids were too young for me to be leaving, so I missed that trip. But I've been to Russia, and I've been to China, and I've been to Egypt, and I've been to Africa, and I've been to the Galapagos, and all those things. So at some point, yeah, I would like to get to Vietnam. My wife has been there. She's been to Southeast Asia. And so I would like to get there and have a chance to see it.
It's funny, in the 70s, nobody would dare go over there. And now it's such a popular, vacation destination. So being a parent, one comes to realize your children are not you. Was this a theme that you were trying to talk about in the book, the separation between parent and child?
Yeah, because it really hit me kind of hard. My son, I was a very active father. I coached him in Little League. I coached him in basketball. I always said that if any idiot was going to yell at him, I'd be the idiot that yelled at him. So I always coached him, and I was always with him. And same with my daughter. I coached my daughter and through all her sports, and attended all her games and all her high school, and spent a lot of time with them in cars, just the two of us having a chance to talk and get to know each other. And then, one day, my son was getting ready to go climb a mountain, and I can't climb mountains. I don't process oxygen the way normal people do. So I can't breathe. And, he's gotten very adept at climbing and doing things like that. And it was an epiphany for me. Again, another epiphany for me, where you really realize that, you know, everybody's their own person, and your children are your own person. You think they're you, you raise them sort of the way you were raised, and you think they're you, but they're not.
Not at all.
Yeah, they're their own person, and you want them to be their own person. You want them to find out who they are. And I've always said to my son, find out who you are and what you stand for, and then live by that moral code, and don't let anyone break it. Treat people with dignity and respect. If you're going to date a young lady, treat her with dignity and respect. And I've said many things to my daughter. My daughter, one time we were in a car, and she looked at me and she said, "I hope someday, Dad, I can marry someone just like you." And my response to her was, "No, honey, you want to marry someone better than me. You want to marry someone that puts you on a pedestal and thinks you're the greatest thing in the world. Not that I don't, but that's what you want. You want someone better than me. You want someone who loves you unconditionally, the way I love you." And it was I think it was a poignant moment for her as well as for me. I want the very best for my kids. I think all of us parents do. We want the very best for our kids.
So did she
And
listen? Did she listen?
she's not married. She's not married yet. She's actually in Europe. She's in Prague. She texted me this morning to say, "Hi, Daddy," and to show me she's laying on a bed, and her quilt, and I'm not exaggerating, she's only 5'4". Her quilt goes from here to the top of her thighs in the bed. And she's like, "How am I supposed to sleep like this?"
It's funny. So we went over that. The novel is about moments in one's life that changes us. What does it mean to be alive? Do you think this country has learned anything from this war, from the Vietnam War? Do you think we've gone forward?
I love my country. I love the United States, and I've traveled enough now to know that I won the lottery. Being born and raised here is literally winning the lottery. Having seen how other people have to live and under different governments and in different conditions, I think this is the most amazing place on earth. But did we learn? There's a great documentary, and I forget the name of it, but it's about the World Trade Center. When the planes flew into the World Trade Center and the aftermath of it. And one of the things they talk about that is really very interesting is how we went into Afghanistan with a noble purpose. And that noble purpose was to get the guy responsible for 3,000 horrible deaths, innocent people killed. And if we had just gone into Afghanistan and done that, we would have come out of there as looked upon very nobly. But instead, for reasons that I don't completely understand, but this documentary talks about, we got sidetracked from Afghanistan and we went into Iraq. And whether it was false pretenses or not, I'm not the person to judge. But things certainly were not as noble as when we went into Afghanistan. And we got sidetracked. And because we got sidetracked, we lost sort of our purpose, and we lost some of our standing in the world. And so when my book came out, it was ironically, it was the same week that we were pulling out of Afghanistan after 20 years. And so I had a couple of veterans organizations interviewing me, asking me if I saw parallels between the Vietnam War and the Afghan War. And I danced around those questions because I'm really not educated on that subject matter. And, I didn't really want to offer an opinion that was incorrect, but you could see the parallels, and the parallels being a lot of people at home wondering why the hell we were over there. Why did we lose so many men and women, and, have those men and women come home with crippling injuries and loss of limbs? I mean, what exactly were we hoping to gain? And I think we lost a little bit of our standing in the world because, the minute we start to pontificate, about countries invading other countries, they look at us and say, you went into Iraq, you were trying to nation build in Afghanistan. And so, I think we lost a little bit of the moral high ground. And I do think it's come back to hurt us.
Yeah, I think so too. I totally agree. And it's really terrible for the people that actually go there and get, fight the war and come back all damaged. It's
Yeah.
So to change the subject a little, you're a best-selling author across multiple genres. You write espionage, police procedurals, legal thrillers, and literary fiction. When you write, do you set out to write in a certain genre? And how do you write? Do you write an outline? How do you start your storyline?
Yeah, I actually don't outline. I used to try to outline, but I wasn't very good at it. And so what would end up happening was that I would spend a lot of time on an outline, months on an outline, and then I'd sit down to write the book. And, within 3 pages of my outline, I'd be off my outline. And so, it's sort of what I talked about a little bit. And I actually talk at writers groups about the magic of writing, and Stephen King talks about it, and Diana Gabaldon, and Charles Dickens talks about in his biography about, putting yourself in a position that you let you let the characters tell you the story, and you as the author just get out of the way. And so I come up with an idea, and I do a lot of my research, and then I begin with a character, and I let that character start to tell me the story. And then other characters come into the story as it's going. And, sometimes in my mysteries and thrillers, I'll have a great twist. The book In Her Tracks came out just a couple of years ago, and it's in the Tracy Crosswhite series, which is very, very popular. And In Her Tracks is the 8th book, and there's something like 25,000 Amazon reviews, which means Google's probably 3 times that, and it's got more Amazon reviews than all my other Tracy books except for the first one. So why is that? I'm trying to figure that out. I don't know. I don't think it's the best book I ever wrote. I just think I think it's a good book, but I think what it has is it has a great twist. And it has a great twist because the twist even surprised me. But it was perfect, and it was inevitable, and it was unpredictable. And so, sometimes that's the joy of writing is discovering those twists, discovering those poignant moments when your characters do something that you didn't expect. Because if you didn't expect it, then 9 times out of 10, neither did the reader. So it was fun. So I don't outline, and I kind of just let the characters start to tell me their story, and then I begin to put their story down. And then what I'll do is at some point in the book, maybe 100 pages into it, although I didn't do it in this last book, but maybe 100 pages into it, I will go and then I will create my own outline of those first 100 pages. And I'm doing that so I can remember names and restaurant names and dogs' names and all the things that I'm going to need. So I'm not scrambling, looking back through, trying to find out, what was that character's name. And I'll start to put together what happens. And then as I'm going through the story, if I think, oh, wow, okay, wait a minute, I want this to happen. And I'll go in, I'll put a note in the earlier chapter that I need to make a change there or whatever. And really what I try to do is I just try to get through that first draft, and get it out on paper so that the story is there and I can then go back and work on it.
So, you said this book that you're working on now, what is the name of this book, by the way?
Which one?
The new one you're writing.
Oh, the 1938 book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to call it yet, but I'll tell you, I will tell you this because it's this is all true. The murder took place in 1938, so it was Prohibition.
Oh, okay.
Right? But there was a nightclub there, and it was run by the underworld, and it was called the Pom Pom Club. And the Pom Pom Club was located on a hill in Seattle, one of Seattle's hills, that is traditionally known as Yesler Hill because that was the man who got there first. But it was called Profanity Hill, and it was called Profanity Hill because the courthouse used to be at the top of the hill, and the cable cars would break down all the time, and the lawyers and the litigants and all those people would have to climb this 390-foot hill to get to the courthouse, and they'd be swearing the whole time. So it became known as Profanity Hill. So right now I'm calling it Murder at the Pom Pom Club, and we'll see what happens.
So how long does it actually take you? So you said it took about a month to write the book, your first draft. So from the first draft, how long does it take to get published?
Well, that book is not really even due until sometime in 2023, late
Oh,
2023. I
okay.
have, my book, What She Found, which is back here. This one just came out a couple weeks ago.
Mhm.
And then Her Deadly Game will be out, I think, sometime around November. And this is a new series. This is a female defense attorney who worked in the prosecutor's office. But she had to leave the prosecutor's office when a romance went wrong, horribly wrong. And she went to work for her father in his defense firm, which she swore she would never work in his defense firm because her father is an alcoholic. And she's dealt with that all her life. And so have her two sisters, and they both work in the law firm. So it's a dysfunctional law firm. It's a dysfunctional home. But she's a very good lawyer, and she brings in this case. So it's a murder trial. So that one will be coming out. And then after that, I have another Tracy book, which I'm doing the editing on. And that book is called Her First Kill. That'll be out sometime in late 2023. And then probably the 1938 book. And then I just picked up a book, which I never do, but I was asked to help. I was asked to write a story. And I'm going to do it because it's a fascinating story about World War II that's never really been told. So I'm going to be working on that here shortly.
So you went to law school and became a lawyer. At what point did you realize you just wanted to? I imagine you just write full time as a writer these days, because it sounds like that's all you've been doing.
Yeah, no, since 2013, I haven't practiced law at all.
So
I knew really very early on that that I wanted to write. I knew since the 7th grade, but everyone in my family, got an advanced degree, a higher education. They're all doctors and lawyers and accountants and stuff. And, I worked for the LA Times, and I kind of chickened out on that path for a number of reasons. One, I didn't want to be in LA with my family here in my, at the time in San Francisco. Salaries was not very good. And, there was just a lot of reasons I ended up going to law school, and I did practice law and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the people I worked with, but it wasn't a passion. It wasn't what I really wanted to do. And I wanted to take a shot, I wanted to take a chance and see, there's a quote in one of my books that talks about, rejection is easier to live with than regret. And so I wanted to see if I could do it. And there was a lot of struggles, a lot of years that, went into trying to get to this point.
well, keep writing. So the title and the book cover, they always say don't judge a book by its cover, but I love your book cover. And how did you come up with the title?
So I appreciate that you saying that you like the book, the cover, because it was a little bit concerning to me. And it remains a little bit concerning to me. And it's concerning because the majority of readers are women. And the majority of readers are women, like a lot of the women on this, they're my age or older. That's who's the majority of readers. And a lot of women don't want to read about war. It's not what they want to read about. And so even though the book really isn't about war, war plays a strong part in it. I think we probably lost a few readers because of the cover. But the title, The World Played Chess, comes from my buddy Dale Walker, who he has a home in Palm Springs, and he goes down there in the winter. And I was going down to visit Dale and his wife to golf, and he picked me up at the airport and said, "What are you working on?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, it's like the world played chess." I said, what do you mean? And he said, you've heard that saying, the world played chess while I played checkers. And I'd never heard it. And so I started doing some reading on it, and it was exactly what the book was about, being so naive that you don't even know what game is being played. And so the funny part of the story is I actually, in the dedication, in the quote, I attributed it to Dale Walker. And my editors called me up and said, "Who the hell is Dale Walker? We can't find him on the internet." And I said, he's a buddy of mine. They said, well, you can't attribute it to him. And I said, why not? I said, it's unattributed. It's not attributed to anybody. And so I had to go back and put it, unattributed, but then I put Dale in the acknowledgements.
So it's interesting. We read this book for my co-ed book club, and I don't take this wrong, but the men liked it much more than the women. They loved it. I mean, we all liked it unanimously, but I would say the men were stronger liking than the women. Do you think it's more a man's book reading it, or just, have you had any feedback to that?
I would say that it's probably not aimed, because I didn't write it that way, but it probably leans more toward men, because it's a coming of age story that I think men can relate to a little bit more than women, although women have their own coming of age stories and they're very similar. So I think it is probably something that men lead more on. But having said that, I will say that there has been a really strong female readership. Maybe not as strong as Sam Hell, but a strong female readership. And again, we forget sometimes that, for all those 50,000 men who died over in Vietnam, and I don't know how many millions served over in Vietnam, there were wives and girlfriends and friends, here in the United States that suffered too. And so it's relatable to them on many levels because of that.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it too. It was great. I'm sort of done with my questions. Can I read you some of the questions in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay. Sharon Pearson said, this has been a fascinating interview. The World Play Chess is one of my favorite books. She had to leave. Thank you. Sam Hell is the book I read. I tell everyone to read. I do also. It's one of my all-time favorites. Is it true that it's being made into a movie?
It is. Where we go, I'm not exactly sure, but a very well accomplished person picked the story up, and she has a screenwriter that's working on the screenplay right now. I haven't seen it yet, but she's the real deal, and the screenwriter's the real deal. So they're hopeful, and I'm hopeful that they'll be able to put together a package and go out and get a studio and actors and all those people interested, and it'll someday be on the big screen. But what's been really interesting to me is how much time really it takes. It's that rare book that gets made into a movie right away. It's that book that just explodes. It's Harry Potter, Where the Crawdads Sing, where it'll get made into a movie in 4 or 5 years. But normally the process takes longer than that. It can be as long as 8 or 9 years before the book actually gets made into a film. So I'm hopeful. I would love to see it.
Yeah, I love to see the books into movies too, but I always find the books to be a much better read than the movies are.
Yeah, that's what people said about Where the Crawdads Sing.
Yeah,
but
well, they left out half the book, but yeah. So 2 questions, and I'm going to add to this question too. When is a book, who decides even when the book is being published in large print? And it's interesting because your book, we have many readers who use Overdrive from the library, which is of the ebook edition of the audio ebook, and your book isn't on Overdrive. Is there a reason for that?
No, I don't know. I'm take a note here. I don't know why that is not the case. I had someone the other day say to me that they couldn't find it in large print edition, and I was fairly certain that it had been published in large print edition. But I'll send an email to my editors and find out what's going on. Those are decisions that are sort of beyond me. Large print actually has to be bought. I mean, there's actually a large print publisher, and so that publisher has to actually buy your book and say we want to print it in large print. But I'll see if I can find out.
Okay, because we have, I have a lot of readers who love the large print. I think Robert touched on an important reason that so many vets don't talk about what they have seen. In the book, he wrote that Bill, the veteran, spoke to Vince because he could tell Vince was listening. So many vets did not find anyone who would listen.
Yeah, and that's really who Vincent became. Vincent became the journal that William could put his story on the pages. And you know, I find that with a lot of people. I think all of us, myself included, we're too quick to open our mouths and start talking. And sometimes, you know, I know for myself, the best thing I can do is just shut up and listen. You know, that's really what a lot of people want, is they want to just tell you what's bothering them, what's the problem, you know, why things aren't great right now. They're not necessarily looking for advice. They're just looking to you know, have a sounding board, someone that will listen to them. And back then, those poor guys, they didn't have, people weren't listening to them. They were protesting them. It was the opposite. And that had to be, they had to feel really isolated and alone. I remember Rod telling me that when he came home from Vietnam, when he was told that, you know, he's getting out of Vietnam, it was that scene in the book where he was literally fighting on the streets in a city, and a Jeep drove up and said, "Get in the car, you're going home." And he almost didn't go because he was in the middle of the battle, right? And they had to literally say, "Get in the car." And within 36 hours, he was home. He was back on the streets of San Carlos. And his parents didn't even know he was coming home. And he got home and no one greeted him. No one was there. He got to his house. He went in the door. His parents were at work. He laid down on the couch, you know, and he was smoking a cigarette on the couch, and he fell asleep because he was exhausted. He dropped the cigarette, and the couch caught on fire, and he nearly burned himself to death. You know, I mean, it was just, you know, just crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
That is crazy. So Ellen Clark wrote, I lost many friends due to the Vietnam War. I was pretty active in anti-war protests at the time, but was disgusted at the way people treated the vets. Who's your favorite author? From Deborah Cole. And what are you reading now?
You know, I can't really say I have a favorite author, and basically I get asked to read a lot of people's books. Their books are being published, and they're looking for blurbs on the cover of their books. And so I get asked to read a lot of different books. And so I don't get the freedom to read a lot of books that I want to read on, you know, so I don't have that luxury right now, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I will say this, I just love a good story. I love to tell a good story. I don't think about the genre, and I love to read a good story, and I don't think about the genre. As long as it's a good story, I'll read it.
I agree. So this Diane, what's her name? Cinna wrote, loved Sam Hell and the World Play Chess. I'd like now to read some of your earlier novels. Can you suggest one that you suggest that's particularly?
Well, I always tell people to start with To My Sister's Grave, which is the first book in the Tracy Crosswhite series, which is a 10-book series. And so the benefit is, if you like it, you know, you got 9 more books, and people that, you know, I get emails all the time from people that'll say, oh my God, you know, I'm on your 3rd book in the Tracy series, and this is so good, you know, I'm going to get the rest. And so, you know, people that really love to read, and I get the impression that a lot of the people on this call and who are a part of your library love to read. I always tell them, you know, start with My Sister's Grave and see if you like it, and kind of go from there. If you like espionage, you know, if you like Russia, things about taking place in Russia and espionage, then The Eighth Sister, which is the Charles Jenkins series, is the first book in that series.
Nancy John, I think this is the last question. Nancy Johnson, fabulous book about the impact people have on your life that stays with you for a lifetime, even though you don't know it at the time. The 3 storylines were so skillfully weaved. I agreed together in a powerful way. That's what she wrote.
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that. I actually have tried to reach the guy that gave me a job and kept me employed for, you know, 3 years as I put my way through Stanford, to thank him. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to find him. I don't know if he's still alive or not. I don't know where he is, but I'd love to have the opportunity to just say thank you to him, and you know, and tell him how much he meant to me.
Does anybody else have any other questions? If you want to unmute and ask, it's okay to do so.
Somebody asked if I work on more than 1 book at a time. And the answer is, it depends on how busy I am and how many deadlines I have. Normally what I do is I try to write a book completely through to get the first draft out. And now I'm working on editing the book, and I'm also working on a storyline for a 3rd book.
That's a lot of books.
It is. But I love what I do, so I'm not going to complain.
What do you do when you're not writing? Like, what do you do in your free time?
Well, I picked up golf like 3 years ago. So I'd say that I golf a lot and I fish a lot. This job has given me some freedom. And so, a friend of mine said to me about 4 weeks ago, hey, you want to go to Northern Ireland and go play in a golf tournament over there and play some of the best courses in Ireland? And I looked on my calendar and there was no reason for me to say no, except for my anxiety. And, I'm trying not to let that rule my life. So I'm going to go play golf in Ireland for 8 days in October. So, I just try to stay busy,
Sounds great.
I ask our last question.
Go ahead.
What's your average number of drafts from the beginning to the publishing date?
Well, in the old days, it used to be 19. Now it's probably closer to three or four, but I've gotten better at what I do.
Yeah.
And I've gotten better because I studied a lot. I studied the craft of writing a lot, and I know how stories are put together. And so I don't have a lot of wasted drafts anymore.
Thank you for that.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Marlene.
I
Thank
don't
you.
have a question,
Thank,
but I'll share an observation. I was in Vietnam. I'm a former foreign correspondent. I spent a lot of time there. I went back there about 5 years ago just to tour in places I knew. And I was struck by how nice the people were to me, as knowing that I'm an American and knowing what we did to them. I saw it, I read about it, and I was stunned by how pleasant they were and nice they were to me. Just sharing that with you.
Yeah, my son said the same thing. He said it was really phenomenal. He had one place, they were going someplace, and so they stayed in people's homes. And these people had very little, but they would continually give him more and more. And he'd have to say to them, no, I can't eat anymore. I can't eat anymore. I'm full. Thank you. And just incredibly gracious. Our next door neighbor, Lou, was a boat person. He was one of the boat people. He came to the United States as one of the boat people, and he's talked about it. And that family, again, they are some of the nicest people. They're just really, really salt of the earth. So yeah, my son had a similar experience.
Marsha Blackman wrote, our guide in Vietnam said, we look forward, not backwards. I guess that's a good way to.
That's a great quote.
Well, thank you so much. This was wonderful as usual. I
Yeah.
can't wait to read the next one.
Thank you. You guys have an amazing book club. I can tell you that not all libraries are equal. The people I meet are all wonderful, but you have 100 people on here today, and you're obviously doing something right. You're obviously picking the right books, or you're getting speakers, and that's a real tribute to your staff and you at the library, that you have so many wonderful people that are reading and reading the books and coming on to discuss them. So this is a privilege. So thank you all very much for having me.
Thank you. And we hope you come again.
I will. You keep asking, I'll keep coming.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you so much,
you.
Robert. Thank
Have a
you.
great
Thank
afternoon.
That was great.
So much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining
Okay.
us, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for reading and coming.